Okay, so the first thing is just to be able to calculate it. So remember that the period of a sine or cosine function is just 2 pi divided by the absolute value of b. So when we look at this first example here, what's the period of this function going to be? If we took 2 pi and then divided by the multiplier in front of our x inside the function, so pi over 6, dividing by a fraction is like multiplying by its reciprocal. So those are equivalent. The pi's cancel. 2 times 6 gives us 12. So the period for that would be 12. And what that means, or what that would mean, is that if we were looking at the sketch of this graph, and I'm not going to use all the other adjustments, but what if we just took the sine of pi over 6 x? Okay, and so this is where I'm going to start to get a little bit different with how I suggest you sketch graphs. Okay, and that is, I would find the period first. So if you find the period and you see that the period is 12, what that means is, since there's no horizontal shifting, I'm just going to mark a first mark at 12. Okay, what I'm then going to do is I'm going to cut this into fourths. Or so when we look at this full period right here, we divide it into 1, 2, 3, 4. Is I just take my original full period of 12, I cut it in half, so half of that's going to be 6, and then I cut each of these in half, that's going to be 3 and 9. And then what I do is I use the generic form of your function. So I'm looking at a sine here. So does the sine start at the maximum, or does it start at the midline? It starts at the midline. So my midline is 0. Then my next point is maximum, then midline, then minimum, then midline. And so this would be the sketch of this graph. So the sine of pi over 6x looks like this, with your amplitude being 1 and -1. So this is the quick and easy way to sketch your graph. Find the period, divide it in half, divide each of those halves in half. You can label your points and then plot them as, again, midlines max, midline minimum. Or if you're in the case of a cosine, you'll go max, midline minimum, midline max. And that's how you can sketch those. Okay, take 2 pi, divide by the coefficient, the multiplier in front of the x, 11. Can't be simplified. There's your period. For the next example, the period is 2 pi divided by the number that's a multiplier in front. This is the fraction 1/3. So it's written a little bit differently than this one, but it still represents 1 over 3. Dividing by a fraction is like multiplying by its reciprocal, 3 over 1. And so your period here will be 6 pi. And let me talk through like one more time what the sketch would look like, because this time, if we were just looking at the sine of x over 3 as our function, we established that the period is 6 pi. So what I would do, since there's no horizontal shift, I can go from 0 to 6 pi, cut that in half, 3 pi, cut each of these in half. So half of 3 pi is 3 pi over 2. Then this would be 6 pi over 2, then 9 pi over 2, then 12 pi over 2. Again, I'm able to use fractional parts. The amplitude doesn't change, so it's still 1 and -1. Okay, and so then you just, again, use the tendency of the graph. The sine graph starts at the midline, then maximum, then midline, then minimum, then midline. And so my sketch of this graph is going to look like that.